I was reborn to the day my elder brother swore he'd sever his own wrist. This time, I chose to watch from the sidelines. Play the full story in one go. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. The exciting story begins right now. If 10 days from now on the training grounds I am unable to deploy the long-lost Heavenly Wind formation to defeat the young Marquis's Iron Cavalry, I, Song Jingming, will willingly sever my right wrist, no questions asked. The autumn wind whipped up the yellow sand on the drill ground, stinging people's faces. That rousing, high-pitched voice struck like a bolt of lightning, suddenly cleaving through my clouded consciousness. I suddenly opened my eyes, and the first thing I saw was the black-backed military banner hanging high over the Marquis of Anyuan's mansion. Not far away, Song Jingming stood with his hands clasped behind his back, head held high and chest thrust out, his face brimming with self-important arrogance. Seated in the armchair of honor was none other than Hu Changting, son of the Marquis of Anyuan. He was casually wiping the long sword in his hand, a cold smile, as if he were looking at a dead man, curving the corners of his lips. Cold sweat instantly soaked my back. I had been reborn, and, as luck would have it, I had returned to the year I was 16, to the very day when Song Jingming had been spouting grand boasts on the drill ground and making a solemn military pledge. In my past life, it was precisely because of this day. My frail and ailing father, in order to preserve the only adopted heir of the second wife's household, dragged his sickly body forward and even went so far as to kneel before the young Marquis to plead for mercy. Only then did he barely manage to stop this death warrant from being issued. Later, to help that good-for-nothing cover up the lies he had spun, my father pored over ancient texts day and night, pouring his heart and soul into it, while my mother sold off her entire dowry to help him cultivate connections within the military. And what did we get in return? He secretly used our second branch's hard-earned money to subsidize the first branch. He cut off my father's medical care and medication when he was gravely ill. And in the end, he treated me like a piece of merchandise, handing me over to that violent, elderly merchant to be his concubine. Before I breathed my last in that tragic past life, he stood by my sickbed, smiling with such gentle refinement. Little sister, I am, after all, a descendant of the first wife's line. Everything belonging to the second wife's household rightfully belongs to me. This is simply returning things to their rightful owner. It felt as though my internal organs still bore the excruciating pain of being seared by poison in a past life, and I snapped back to my senses. Beside me, my father, Song Henian, had turned ashen-faced at what he was hearing. He was an upright and dignified scholar who had placed the greatest importance on rules and etiquette throughout his life. Seeing Song Jingming acting so presumptuous, my father was overcome with rage. He began to cough violently, raised his gaunt, trembling hand, and struggled to step forward. You good-for-nothing. What do you know about military formations? Hurry up and... Dad! Without hesitation, I reached out and grabbed my father's wrist so tightly that even I felt a shiver run through me. My father froze and turned to look at me in shock. Jinchu, what are you doing? If you don't stop him, your brother. Father, you are mistaken, I said in a low voice, my gaze fixed intently on the figure in the center of the training ground who was stealing glances at us out of the corner of his eye. I knew Song Jingming's motives all too well. The only reason he dared to act so defiantly in front of Hu Changting today was because he was counting on Father's tendency to protect his own. He was banking on Father swallowing his pride to cover for him and plead on his behalf. Not only did he want to earn a reputation in the military as a bold and fearless man who wasn't afraid to make bold promises, but he also wanted to dump all the dirty work of cleaning up after others on his second wife. I took a deep breath, then suddenly raised my voice, my words ringing out clearly across most of the drill ground. My elder brother is a man of unyielding resolve, molded by our eldest uncle. Since being adopted into our second branch of the family, he has devoted himself day after day to serving the imperial court. A man's word is his bond. With the young Marquis present and the military might on full display, if Father were to step in and hinder my elder brother now, who possesses such lofty ambitions to break through the enemy formation, would that not crush his spirit and invite ridicule that our Song family has failed to raise our sons properly, producing a coward who dares only spout empty boasts? As soon as those words were spoken, the soldiers who had been standing around watching the spectacle all cast him amused glances. The smug look on Song Jingming's face froze instantly. He whipped his head around and stared intently at me, a flicker of disbelief and panic flashing in his eyes. He clearly hadn't expected that his younger sister, who was usually the most obedient and most concerned with maintaining family harmony, would say something today that would put him on the spot like this. Song Jinchu, what kind of nonsense are you spouting? Song Jingming lost his temper and instinctively reached out to scold me, then turned to look at my father. Father, your son was just trying to. For the sake of the Song family's honor, this daughter understands. I interrupted him bluntly, wrapping my arm firmly around my father's wrist from behind, preventing him from moving even an inch. Meeting Song Jingming's gaze, which was practically spitting fire, I curved my lips into an impeccable, gentle smile. Since my brother is so concerned with righteousness, he should know that in the military there are no idle threats. By shirking your responsibility like this, could it be that all those bold and grand words you spoke just now were merely a way to toy with the young Marquis? As soon as the words young Marquis were uttered, Hu Changting, seated at the head of the table, finally stopped wiping his knife. His eyes, as sharp as a falcon's, swept coldly over Song Jingming, before finally settling on me with a hint of interest. After a brief silence, Hu Changting snorted derisively and slammed his long sword down on the table. Miss Song is quite right, this training ground isn't a place where just anyone can come and spout empty words. With a wave of his hand, Hu Changting signaled, and the deputy commander standing nearby immediately stepped forward carrying a tray. On the tray lay, to everyone's surprise, a clearly written pledge of life and death and a box of bright red seal paste. Song Jingming, here is the petition, said Hu Changting, his voice as cold as ice shards. In 10 days, I will be waiting for you here at the training ground to break through my formation. If you fail, you'll have to leave your right hand behind. Sign here. Song Jingming stared at the crimson seal pad, his legs trembling uncontrollably. His face was as white as paper, cold sweat pouring down his forehead in large beads, and his Adam's apple bobbed laboriously. He looked at his father in despair, his lips quivering, yet he couldn't bring himself to utter a single word. Because my words had completely cut off all his escape routes. If he begged for mercy now, not only would he have offended the Marquis of Anyuan's household, but he would also become the laughingstock of the entire capital, and his biological father from the first wife, who valued his reputation above all else, would certainly flay him alive. In the end, my father, Song He, couldn't bear to see it. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but I, hidden beneath the wide sleeves of my robe, pinched the palm of my hand hard. My eyes instantly welled up with tears, and I pleaded softly, Father, if you back down for him today, not only will you humiliate the young Marquis, but my eldest uncle will also blame you for blocking my elder brother's path to success. Your health is already fragile. How much longer must you take the blame for others? My father shuddered. He looked at the tears welling up in the corners of my eyes, then glanced at that good-for-nothing adopted son in the distance. In the end, he let out a long sigh, closed his eyes, and turned his head away. That single turn of his head completely dashed Song Jingming's last shred of hope. Under the impatient urging of his second-in-command and Hu Changting's icy glare, Song Jingming, like a puppet whose soul had been drained, tremblingly extended his right hand, the one he had boasted could command the realm, and pressed it heavily into the seal pad before affixing it to the life and death pledge that would determine his fate. The moment he signed his name, he staggered back 2 steps as if completely drained of strength. If not for the servant standing beside him to support him, he would likely have collapsed right then and there. Hu Changting let out a cold laugh, didn't even glance at him again, and swept his sleeve as he walked away. The crowd on the parade ground gradually dispersed, and Song Jingming, supported by a servant, walked over to us. He stared at me intently, his gaze so venomous it seemed he wanted to devour me alive. He lowered his voice and said through gritted teeth, My dear sister, you've certainly shown your fine upbringing today. I met his fierce gaze without a shred of fear. On the contrary, an unprecedented sense of exhilaration welled up within me. I smoothed out my sleeves and smiled faintly. You flatter me, brother. 10 days is a tight deadline. You'd better hurry back to the manor and study that long-lost heavenly wind formation. Swords and blades have no eyes. If you lose, I'm afraid I'll never hear you call me sister again. Song Jingming turned ashen with rage at my offhand remark and stormed off. In the carriage on the way back to the manor, Father Song Henian, still reeling from the shock and anger he had experienced at the training ground, began coughing violently the moment he sat down, and a trace of blood even trickled from the corner of his mouth. Father! I hurriedly took a handkerchief to cover his mouth, my eyes stinging with tears. It had been the same in my past life. Father's already frail body had been completely drained of vitality by Song Jingming's repeated outbursts of arrogance and demands. Upon returning to the courtyard of the second branch of the Song family, Mother Lin turned pale with fright when she saw father being supported by attendants as he entered the gate. She immediately ordered the maids to prepare medicine and summon a doctor. In an instant, the main hall was thrown into chaos. Just at that critical moment, a series of heavy footsteps sounded outside the courtyard gate. Without even waiting for an announcement, Song Jingming abruptly pulled back the curtain and strode inside. His gaze swept quickly over his father, who was leaning against the bed, gasping for breath. There was not a trace of concern in his eyes, but rather a sense of self-righteous urgency. Father, regarding today's incident at the training ground, although Sister Jinchu spoke rashly, now that things have come to this, I cannot truly bring shame upon our Song family. Song Jingming took 2 steps forward, clasped his hands together, and spoke rapidly. That heavenly wind formation is incredibly profound. I need to study that unique copy of Taigong's Chimen from the storeroom. Furthermore, a 10-day deadline is far too short. I must also seek guidance from the military elders, and establishing those connections will inevitably require money. I humbly ask Mother to advance me a silver note for 3,000 taels. 3,000 taels! Upon hearing this, Mother Lin gasped so hard that she spilled half the warm water she was holding. That was the total income from the second wife's 2 estates on the outskirts of the capital over an entire 3 years. Leaning against his pillow, my father pointed at him with a trembling finger. You wretch! You've brought this colossal disaster upon yourself, and yet you still have the nerve to come here and demand the family's lifeblood. What on earth are you talking about, father? Song Jingming straightened his back, furrowed his brow, and looked as though he'd been deeply wronged. I was adopted to carry on the second branch of the family. If I lose face in front of the young Marquis, will that bring you any honor? If my eldest uncle were to learn that you treat your adopted son so harshly, he would surely accuse you of being unkind. Here we go again. In his previous life, he used the same line of reasoning: the eldest son bestows favors, and the second son must be grateful, combined with pressure from his eldest uncle, Song Buchang, to force his mother to dip into her dowry to fund his bottomless pit. I looked at him coldly, then slowly stood up, shielding my mother behind me. My tone was calm but tinged with an unquestionable chill. Brother, choose your words carefully. Father is gravely ill and in need of rest. Yet the moment you walked in, you didn't even ask after his health or tend to him. Instead, you immediately brought up 3,000 taels and the family's only surviving copy of that rare book. Is this the filial piety that our eldest uncle taught you? Song Jingming flushed red when I cut him off. A man's ambitions lie far and wide. I'm doing this for the future of our family. So much for the family's future, I interrupted him, turning to face my mother and bowing slightly. Mother, father's illness has struck with great force, and the doctor says he must avoid worry at all costs. You've been tending to him day and night, and I'm afraid it's difficult for you to spare your attention for the household's affairs. Though I am not particularly capable, I am now old enough to learn how to manage the household. Why not let me temporarily take charge of the household's records and accounts, so that you can focus on caring for father with peace of mind? My mother was already so angry at Song Jingming that her chest ached, and since she knew I'd always been level-headed since childhood, she nodded immediately, untied a pair of matching pendants from her waist, and handed them to me. All right, Jinchu has grown up. For the next few days, no one is to disturb your father with any of that nonsense. The moment I took the matching token, I clearly saw the flash of shock and gloom in Song Jingming's eyes. He never would have imagined that his once docile and taciturn younger sister would not only cut off his retreat on the school grounds today, but would now even dare to snatch power right out of their mother's hands. Song Jinchu, you're just an unmarried girl. What business do you have managing the accounts? This is an urgent matter for me. Tell the bookkeeper to pay me right away. He reached out to snatch my token from me. I took half a step back, my eyes hardening as I raised my voice. Someone, please escort the eldest young master out. Father is coughing up blood right now. Anyone who dares to make a commotion here will be beaten to death with sticks for the crime of insubordination. Seeing my stern expression and the head of household token in my hand, several of the maidservants immediately plucked up their courage, stepped forward, and, half inviting, half pushing, blocked the cursing Song Jingming from entering the door. The house finally fell quiet. After tucking my parents in for the night, I immediately turned and went to the accounting office in the back room. Steward Zhang, bring all the expense records from the eldest young master's quarters for the past 2 years, along with the inventory ledgers for the storeroom right here. I sat upright in my armchair and slammed the token down on the desk. Mr. Zhang, the household steward, had been with the family for many years. Seeing me arrive in such a grand manner, he didn't dare to be disrespectful and quickly brought over several thick stacks of ledgers. I opened one of them, my fingertips gliding over the lines of ink. The more I looked, the more my heart filled with a cold sneer. On the 15th of last month, the eldest young master withdrew 500 taels of silver under the pretext of purchasing Huizhou ink and a Duan inkstone. On the 8th, he claimed he was hosting a banquet at Zuishanlu to socialize with a classmate and withdrew 300 taels. Manager Zhang, I looked up at him, is this Duan inkstone made of gold, or were those classmates drinking nectar and ambrosia? Where did all this silver end up? Cold sweat broke out on Manager Zhang's forehead, and he stammered, unable to answer. I know that even without you telling me, I snorted coldly and closed the ledger. In my previous life, I had uncovered the truth. All this money had been taken by Song Jingming to bribe his gambling-addicted eldest cousin in the first branch of the family in exchange for a reputation there as someone who was loyal and honorable. The second branch scrimped and saved, only to end up supporting that whole brood of ungrateful wretches in the first branch. Starting today, without my personal seal or handwritten authorization, the accounting office is not to send even a single coin, and the storeroom is not to send even a single sheet of paper to the eldest young master's courtyard. I stared at Manager Zhang, my tone icy and my words ringing out with authority. If he dares to make a scene, tell him to come straight to me. And if I find out who dares to secretly give him any extra money. I paused for a moment, my gaze sweeping over the few stewards in the room. Sell them all into the black mine, their families are guilty as well. Yes, yes. Second young lady, please rest assured, this old servant understands. Manager Zhang wiped the sweat from his brow repeatedly and bowed deeply. As I stepped out of the accounting office, the autumn sun was shining brightly, and I took a deep breath of the crisp, cool air. Song Jingming, don't you pride yourself on being a prodigy? I'll be interested to see how you're going to fill that massive hole in the training grounds now that you no longer have the mountains of gold and silver from the second wife's household to prop you up. After the flow of money from Song Jingming was cut off, the second wife's courtyard remained unusually quiet for 2 days. I knew this was nothing more than the calm before the storm. That good-for-nothing Song Jingming, lacking any ability of his own, would inevitably turn to the eldest branch for help. Sure enough, on the morning of the 3rd day, my eldest uncle, Song Buchang, putting on airs as the eldest brother of the first branch, led Song Jingming in a grand procession through the gate of the second branch's courtyard. Where's he Nian? Send him out to see me. As soon as Song Buchang entered the main hall, he brazenly sat down in the seat of honor and slammed the purple clay teapot he was holding down hard on the table. Jingming was adopted into your family to carry on the family line. With the major examination at the training grounds just around the corner, instead of doing everything in your power to support him, you're withholding his silver and even hiding his formation manuals from him. What kind of logic is that? I was walking out of the inner chamber carrying the freshly brewed herbal decoction. I handed the bowl to the maidservant behind me, then stepped forward and curtsied gracefully, my face radiating impeccable deference. Please calm your anger, uncle. Father is bedridden with a lingering illness, and the doctor has strictly instructed that he must not be exposed to drafts. If you have anything to say, it would be just the same if you spoke to your niece. Song Buchang furrowed his brow, gave me a once-over, and snorted coldly, what do you, a mere girl, know? Military affairs are no child's play. Hand over the keys to the storeroom at once, and fetch the strange gates of Taigong for Jingming. If you delay the military drill 10 days from now, the Marquis of Anyuan's household will hold you accountable. Can your second branch of the family bear the consequences? I raised my eyes and calmly met Song Buchang's calculating gaze, then suddenly let out a soft chuckle. I'm afraid I don't quite understand what you mean, uncle. That military pledge was something my elder brother insisted on signing himself, and he was the one who affixed his signature before the marquee. Since my elder brother was so confident, why, when it came time to break through the formation, did he have to rely on the second branch of the family to sell off everything they owned to make up the shortfall? I paused, pulled a thin ledger I'd prepared in advance from my sleeve, and gently placed it on the coffee table beside Song Buchang. My voice was kept extremely low, yet every word was clear. Furthermore, this ledger records that over the past 2 years, my elder brother has withdrawn tens of thousands of taels of silver from the second branch of the family. The vast majority of that money has flowed into the gambling houses my eldest cousin from the first branch frequents. If you truly care for my elder brother, why not first investigate where this silver has gone? If you can recover these funds, it would be more than enough, not only to grease the wheels with military officials, but even to hire another renowned master of formation arts. Song Buchang glanced down at the details in the ledger. His face instantly turned from red to white, then from white to ashen. His eldest son's gambling addiction was his Achilles heel. If this matter were to be exposed to the clan, what would become of the eldest branch's reputation? You insolent girl, how dare you audit an elder's accounts? Song Buchang's hand trembled slightly as he pointed at me, but he didn't dare bring up the matter of money again. I wouldn't dare, uncle. It's just that my father is gravely ill, and the second branch of the family simply doesn't have any spare funds. If you truly care about the family's honor, wouldn't it be better for the first branch to contribute and help my elder brother get through this crisis? I smiled as I cut off his last avenue of retreat. Song Buchang shot Song Jingming a fierce glare, stood up abruptly, didn't even take a sip of tea, and stormed out. Seeing that his patron had abandoned him, Song Jingming turned deathly pale. He shot me a vicious glare but had no choice but to slink out after him. After sending those blood-sucking locusts on their way, I turned and returned to my study. After dismissing my attendants, I retrieved the rosewood box containing the sole surviving copy of **The Strange Gates of Taigong** from a hidden compartment deep within the bookshelf. As my fingertips glided over the weathered grain, the image of a cool, aloof figure came to mind. Yan Ci, courtesy name Han Zhou. He was a poor scholar whom my father had taken in during his years of wandering as a student. In my previous life, the eldest branch of the family despised him for his humble origins and oppressed him in every way. Song Jingming, in particular, treated him like a servant, ordering him about and humiliating him. Yet it was precisely this man, so mistreated by his own family, who, when the Song family's empire was crumbling and I was forcibly shoved into a wedding palanquin, single-handedly fought his way through the enemy lines with his sword, risking his life to protect me and break through the encirclement. Miss, are you planning to meet young Master Yan? Banksia, my trusted maid, saw me standing there lost in thought with the box in my arms and gently reminded me. Go to the outer courtyard and let them know that father has an academic dilemma and would like to invite Mr. Yan to the inner study for a conversation. I refocused my mind, a flash of resolve crossing my eyes. Since Song Jingming was a hopeless case, I would take it upon myself to nurture that true towering tree. Less than half an hour later, the beaded curtain rustled softly. The man who approached wore a blue cotton robe faded to a pale blue from repeated washings. He was tall and slender, with strikingly delicate brow bones. Though his attire was shabby, his deep, piercing eyes shone as sharply as cold stars, and his posture was as upright as a pine tree, exuding a dignified pride, neither servile nor arrogant. This was Yan Ci. Yan Ci greets the second young lady. He came to a halt 3 steps away, raised his hand in a slight bow, polite yet distant. I motioned for Banksia to wait outside the door, then poured a cup of hot tea myself and handed it to him. Mr. Yan, please don't stand on ceremony. I've invited you here today in my father's name because I have a matter of great importance to entrust to you, one that concerns the very survival of the Song family and your own future as well. Yan Ci did not accept the tea. He lowered his gaze slightly and spoke in a cool, detached tone. I am but a penniless scholar who owes my very survival to my mentor's kindness. I fear I am not up to the great task you speak of, miss. Why do you belittle yourself, sir? I set the teacup on the small table beside him and looked him straight in the eyes. My father once said that you are capable of bringing peace to the realm through literature and stability through military might, and that you possess extraordinary talent in the art of battle formations. Now that Song Jingming has signed a life or death pledge at the training ground, you know better than I do what kind of man he is. In 10 days' time, he is bound to suffer a crushing defeat. When that happens, not only will he have to sever his own wrist, but the entire Song family will face the full fury of the Marquis of Anyuan. Yan Xi finally looked up, a hint of surprise flashing in his eyes. Clearly, he hadn't expected the second young lady, who had always been sheltered away from the outside world and had been utterly submissive to her adoptive brother, to utter such cold, piercingly perceptive words. Since you know disaster is imminent, what good will it do to seek out Yen? Although his tone remained calm, his wariness had already diminished by half. I pushed the rosewood box toward him and slowly opened it. Inside lay, resting quietly, The Secret Art of Taigong *, a book that countless generals had been eager to obtain. I don't want Song Jingming to win. I want him to be disgraced and driven out of the second household once and for all. I lowered my voice, each word sounding as if it had been soaked in icy water. But the Song family must not fall at the hands of the Marquis of Anyuan. I shall present this unique copy to you today. 10 days from now, I want you to take my father's place on the training grounds and break through the Skywind formation. Yan Xi looked at the unique copy inside the box, and his pupils suddenly contracted. This was the peerless endgame he had been studying for years but had never been able to crack, and now it lay right before him, so effortlessly. Aren't you afraid, young lady, that I, Yan, might run off with this rare copy, or fall in battle? Yan Xi looked up, his piercing gaze fixed firmly on me, as if trying to see through my feigned composure. I met his gaze without flinching, the gratitude from my past life and the resolve of this one intertwining in my eyes. Once you trust someone, you must not doubt them. You have the ambition of a Kuanping, all you lack is a gust of wind. Today, I, Song Jinchu, will be the one to lend you that wind. 10 days from now, will you dare to set foot on Qingyan Road in the capital? The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. After a long moment, Yan Xi suddenly smoothed his robes and took half a step back, then solemnly bowed deeply to me, his hands touching the ground. Since Miss has entrusted this task to me, I, Yan, will certainly not fail to fulfill it. Late into the night, on the veranda outside the second wife's study, a dark figure crept furtively along the wall. I sat upright in the unlit side room, watching coldly through the openwork, carved window lattice as the dark figure deftly slid open the window latch and slipped into the study. By the faint, chilly moonlight, I recognized him at a glance. It was Wang Kai, the most trusted servant at Song Jingming's side. Miss, he's gone inside. Would you like me to gather some men right now and go catch the thief? Banksia lowered her voice, her eyes brimming with indignation. If you're going to catch a thief and recover the stolen goods, what's the point of arresting a servant to take the fall? I held Banksia's hand, my tone so calm it lacked even the slightest inflection. Before long, Wang Kai climbed out the window, clutching a rosewood box tightly to his chest, and disappeared into the night as he jogged away. That box was the very one I had ordered to be hidden in a secret compartment in my study just a few days earlier, right in front of Song Buchang. Seeing the thief escape, Banksia stamped her feet in frustration. Miss, that's the only surviving copy of Taigong's Chiman *. If he really takes it and uses it to master the formation, won't that turn the tables on us? I picked up the teacup beside me, which had long since grown cold, and gently stirred the tea leaves, a hint of coldness curving the corners of my lips. If he had the mind to study rare manuscripts, my eldest uncle wouldn't have been so eager to shove him into our second branch of the family back then. The book in that box is nothing more than a discarded draft left behind by father from his early days of devising formation strategies. The method for breaking the heavenly wind formation recorded within may seem ingenious, but in reality, the gate of life and the gate of death are completely reversed. In my previous life, my father searched ancient texts day and night to help Song Jingming break through an enemy formation. I once witnessed him toss this discarded manuscript into a brazier, sighing that it was 1,000 li off the mark. If used in actual battle, it would surely lead to the annihilation of the entire army. In this life, I managed to hide it away before my father could burn it. I also took care to tear out the 2 characters useless manuscript that he had marked on the title page, then placed it, exactly as it was, into the rosewood box. With his main wife having cut off his financial support, Song Jingming, having nowhere else to turn, would inevitably set his sights on the study. He was a man eager for quick success. Once he got his hands on the seemingly profound secret manual, he would simply memorize it by rote without understanding it and would never have the patience to delve into the principles behind the formations. He thought he had found a lifeline, but in reality, he was clutching his own death warrant. Over the next few days, things remained dead quiet over at the main wife's quarters, while Song Jingming's courtyard, in a rare turn of events, was abuzz with late-night activity by lamplight. It was said that he spent every day in his courtyard, gesturing with a twig, looking increasingly arrogant and smug. He even privately told his servants that in 10 days' time, he would make the young marquis look at him with new eyes. As for me, I focused all my energy on Yen Ci from the School of Foreign Languages. At dusk on the 8th day, I took Banksia with me and, avoiding the prying eyes of the others, quietly made my way to the bamboo grove in the northeast corner of the outer courtyard. This was Yen Ci's residence, and also the most dilapidated courtyard in the entire Song Manor. The gate to the courtyard was ajar. I didn't ask anyone to announce my arrival and simply walked right in. In an open space within the courtyard, Yen Ci was sitting cross-legged on the ground. Before him, the dirt was densely studded with dozens of broken bamboo branches, and he had arranged several pieces of broken stone in a peculiar pattern. The afterglow of the setting sun fell upon his refined profile, clearly revealing the sharp, strategic intensity in his eyes. Hearing footsteps, Yen Ci did not look up. He simply dropped the last pebble in his hand into an inconspicuous corner and said calmly, "Miss, please look, this is the heavenly wind formation of the Hu family's cavalry, renowned throughout the land." I stepped forward and looked down closely. Though I knew nothing of military strategy, just from the arrangement of those bamboo branches and pebbles, I could faintly sense a menacing aura washing over me. This formation is like a coiled serpent, with its head and tail interlocking. Conventional methods for breaking such formations all focus on striking its vital point. Yen Ci brushed the dirt off his hands, stood up, and looked straight at me. But as recorded in *Taigong's Chiman *, the essence of the heavenly wind formation lies not in its shape, but in the wind's momentum. The training ground is located in the western suburbs, where northwest winds often blow in during the fall. When Hu Changting sets up the formation, he will certainly position the gate of life to face the wind and the gate of death to have its back to the wind. If we launch a conventional all-out attack, we'll fall right into the trap at the gate of death, a one-way trip with no return. My heart gave a sudden jolt. In my previous life, it had taken my father days of painstaking effort just to barely grasp this concept, yet Yen Ci, in just a few days, had not only identified the array's focal point but also seen right through Hu Changting's scheme to exploit the favorable timing and location. "Since you've seen through this, sir, is there a way to resolve it?" I suppressed the turmoil in my heart and asked softly. Yen Ci's gaze sharpened slightly, and he lowered his voice a notch. "To break this formation, we must take the opposite approach. Instead of striking at its weakest point, we'll sever its head and tail, supplemented by fire attacks to disrupt the wind's direction." However, he paused, his brow slightly furrowed. "We cannot use real weapons on the training grounds, and a fire attack is out of the question. I will need 36 specially made red silk battle flags, accompanied by bronze bells. By using the flags to confuse the enemy's eyes and the bells to confuse the horse's ears, we can subdue the enemy without fighting." Upon hearing this, I didn't hesitate for a moment. I took a heavy bundle from Banksia's hands and handed it to Yen Ci. "I have instructed a trusted employee in the sewing workshop to work through the night to complete the 36 red silk banners with bronze bells you requested. The dimensions and weight are all in accordance with ancient methods, without the slightest deviation." Yen Ci paused for a moment, something he rarely did, then took the bundle, opened it, and looked at the bright red battle flag neatly folded inside. Complex emotions churned in his deep eyes. He gave me a long, intense look. That gaze no longer held the initial aloofness and wariness, but instead conveyed a sense of mutual respect, as if we shared an unspoken understanding. The second young lady's strategic brilliance is something even Yen cannot match. Yen Ci tightened his grip on his bundle, his voice as steady as a mountain. "In 2 days' time, Yen will certainly secure justice for the young lady. It's not for my sake, but for your own meteoric rise." I nodded slightly and turned to leave. A breeze picked up, causing the bamboo leaves in the courtyard to rustle, yet it could not dispel the murderous intent in my eyes. On the morning of the 10th day, autumn frost blanketed the long street. Outside the training grounds of the Marquis of Anyuan's mansion, war drums thundered. I was accompanying my father, who was struggling with illness, and had just stepped down from the carriage when I saw Song Jingming, clad in silver-white armor and wearing a jade crown, straddling a tall, majestic horse. He looked truly full of vigor and confidence. He dismounted and walked over to where my father and I were standing. The fear that had been evident on his face just a few days earlier was gone, replaced by a confident air of arrogance. "Father isn't feeling well, so there's really no need for you to come watch the match in person. We wouldn't want my son to break through the young Marquis' formation and become too arrogant, which might startle you." Song Jingming bowed in a pretentious manner, but his peripheral vision swept over me with a cold glare. "Jinchu, little sister, keep your eyes wide open today and watch carefully. Watch closely as your elder brother here makes a name for himself in the capital. Once I've taken first place, you'd better hand over the keys to the second branch's accounts without a fuss, to avoid straining our sibling bond." As I looked at his reckless expression, a faint smile played at the corners of my lips, as gentle as that of the most well-behaved younger sister. "Well then, little sister will stay here and wish my brother a victorious start and the fulfillment of his wishes in advance." On the training ground, the sound of war drums rolled like thunder, sending a chill down people's spines. On the command platform, Hu Changting, the Marquis of Anyuan, sat upright in a rosewood armchair. Clad in a jet-black brocaded robe, his expression was cold and distant as he idly ran his fingertips over the sword at his waist. Below the platform, 300 elite horsemen of the Hu clan were arrayed in formation according to the 9 palaces and 8 trigrams. The scene was deathly silent, yet exuded a chilling, menacing aura. This was the Heavenly Wind Formation, a formation that struck fear into the hearts of countless military strategists. Eldest son of the Song family, Wu Changting leaned forward slightly, his gaze sweeping across the arena like a knife. "The 10-day deadline has passed. Since you've signed the life and death pledge, if you fail to break the formation today, this Marquis will take your right hand." Song Jingming sat astride his horse. Though his face had turned slightly pale from the overwhelming aura, the thought of the rare manuscript he had studied diligently the night before filled him with a surge of elation and pride. He suddenly drew his sword and shouted, "Young Marquis, watch this." With that, he dug his heels into the horse's flanks and, leading several dozen garrison troops borrowed from the Song family, charged headlong into the enemy formation. I helped my father take a seat in the viewing stand, my gaze fixed coldly on Song Jingming's retreating figure. According to that discarded scroll, the gate of life for the Heavenly Wind Formation was in the northwest, and the gate of death was in the southeast. In reality, with the strong northwest winds typical of autumn, Wu Changting had long since taken advantage of the weather to turn the northwest sector into a true gate of death trap. Sure enough, as soon as Song Jingming entered the formation, he began shouting orders and gesturing, directing the provincial troops to charge straight toward the northwest corner. Change formation. The signal flag on the high platform was suddenly waved downward. In the blink of an eye, the Hu clan's cavalry, which had seemed disorganized, suddenly sprang to life like a giant serpent. The soldiers in the northwest corner instantly fell back on both sides, revealing 3 ranks of heavily armored infantry wielding long shields made of refined steel. Before Song Jingming could even react, dozens of spears shot out in unison from behind the wall of shields, like venomous snakes striking. "Ah!" Accompanied by several blood-curdling screams, the Song family's troops instantly fell into disarray. The horse beneath Song Jingming was struck in the leg by a pike. It let out a whinny and collapsed with a thud. He was flung from the saddle like a torn sack, rolling several times before crashing heavily onto the yellow earth. His headdress shattered, and he was covered in dust and dirt, looking utterly bedraggled. The whole thing took no more than half an incense stick's worth of time. This can't be possible." Ignoring the excruciating pain throughout his body, Song Jingming stared in disbelief at the mounted soldiers towering over him, their gun barrels pointed directly at him. His voice cracked with fear. "The book clearly states that the northwest is the gate of life. That unique copy couldn't possibly be wrong. From the command platform, Hu Changting let out a soft snort. With nothing but this kind of armchair strategy, this good-for-nothing actually dares to break through this Marquis formation? Guards, according to the rules of the life and death pledge, cut off one of his arms. Two fierce-looking soldiers immediately stepped forward and pinned Song Jingming down as he lay limp on the ground. Their steel swords were drawn, their blades glinting coldly. No! Don't! Song Jingming, terrified and weeping uncontrollably, struggled desperately to turn his head toward the viewing stand and wailed at the top of his lungs, "Father! Uncle! Save me! I'm the eldest grandson of the second wife's family. You can't just stand by and let me die." My great-uncle Song Wuchang, sitting not far away, had long since turned ashen with fear. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold his teacup, and he certainly wouldn't dare say a word that might provoke the Marquis. My father was trembling with rage. Pointing at the figure in the center of the courtyard, who looked like a lump of mud, he let out a violent cough and nearly fainted. I gently patted my father on the back to help him catch his breath, then stood up, smoothed out the wrinkles in my skirt, and stepped out of the shed, one step at a time. "Please calm down, Your Grace." My voice wasn't loud, but it carried remarkably clearly across the vast training ground. Hu Changting shot me a cold glance. "What? Is there no one left in the Song family that it's now up to a sheltered young lady to plead for mercy?" "Your Excellency has misunderstood." I bowed slightly, keeping my back straight, and cast a calm glance at Song Jingming, who lay on the ground like a dead dog. The state has its laws, and the military has its regulations. Once a life or death pledge has been signed, one must accept the consequences. Song Jingming is arrogant and conceited, and his skills are lacking. Not only has he brought shame upon the Song family, but he has also disgraced your lordship's ultimate formation. Whether this hand of his is spared or severed is entirely up to your lordship's discretion. The second branch of the Song family will not utter a single word of complaint. As soon as those words were spoken, the entire room was taken aback. Song Jingming's eyes widened suddenly, and he roared in disbelief, "Song Jinchu! You wicked woman! How dare you stand by and do nothing? Aren't you afraid of being punished according to the clan's rules?" Without even glancing at him, I continued to speak loudly to Hu Changting. "However, the disgrace suffered by Song Jingming alone does not mean the Song family is without others. Today, there is another member of the Song family who is willing to lead 36 riders to break through Your Excellency's heavenly wind formation." A flicker of interest crossed Hu Changting's eyes. "Oh. I'm eager to see what other tricks the Song family has up their sleeves." I shifted slightly to the side, clearing a path toward the back of the shed. In the morning light, Yan Xi, clad in a long, pure white robe and clutching a battle flag as red as blood, strode confidently into the arena. As a gentle breeze swept past, the hem of his robe fluttered. His handsome, refined face showed not a trace of fear, only a composure as steadfast as mountains and peaks. He walked into the center of the arena. Ignoring Song Jingming, who was struggling on the ground, he faced Hu Changting directly on the high platform, bowed slightly, and spoke in a voice as clear as jade shattering on ice. "This humble subject, Yan Xi, requests 36 horsemen from your lordship. I humbly ask for your guidance." Hu Changting eyed the scholar in white standing before him, who wasn't even wearing armor, and sneered, 36 riders defeated my 300 iron cavalry. "Yan Xi, if you fail as well, not only will Song Jingming's hand be cut off, but you'll lose your life too." Yan Xi showed no change in expression. He simply uttered 2 words in a calm tone, "Sign the contract." The drums sounded once more, and the atmosphere grew tense with the scent of battle. Yan Xi drew an unsharpened silverwood spear from the weapons rack and leaped onto his horse. Behind him, the 36 garrison soldiers each held a red silk flag with a bronze bell, flags I had ordered to be hastily made overnight. The wind rises from the northwest. The celestial wind formation draws its strength from the wind. Shields up, spears out. Yan Xi stood at the front of the formation. His voice was not loud, but, bolstered by his inner energy, it carried clearly to the ears of the 36 men. "Do not attack the front or rear. Do not enter the open gate. When you enter the formation shortly, spread out according to the 3 talents formation. Do not engage when you encounter shields. Wave your banners when you encounter spears. Hu Changting stood on a high platform, waving his command banner vigorously. 300 ironclad cavalry charged forward like a terrifying black wave, and the gate of death in the northwest once again opened its blood-red maw. Yan Xi's eyes flashed with determination, and he suddenly pointed his spear diagonally. Charge! The 36 riders scattered like grains of sand, gliding effortlessly into the wall of heavy armored shields. Just as the lances were about to strike, Yan Xi roared, "Raise the banners! Ring the bells!" In the blink of an eye, 36 specially made, wide red silk banners suddenly unfurled in the howling wind. The bright red banners, like blinding balls of flame, were whipped by the northwest wind and lashed furiously against the visors of the Hu family's heavily armored infantry, instantly obscuring their vision. At the same time, the specially crafted bronze bell at the top of the red banner emitted a shrill and rapid tingling sound as it was buffeted by the gale and violently shaken. This ringing was not haphazard, but rather secretly aligned with the chaotic sounds technique of the Chiminduanjia school, producing an extremely high-pitched tone. The war horses of the Hu clan's iron cavalry had been rigorously trained and were accustomed to the deep, commanding beats of the war drums. Now, however, spurred on by the shrill ringing of the bells and with their vision obscured by the red silk, they immediately began to whinny restlessly, and signs of disorder began to appear within their ranks. Change formation. Beat the drums. Hu Changting, standing on the stage, furrowed his brow and immediately gave the order. But Yan Xi didn't give him a moment's respite. He had been waiting for this brief pause, the split second when the enemy's formation shifted and the drumbeat changed. Cut off their command center and strike straight at the heart of their forces. Yan Xi's silverwood spear darted forward like a white snake striking out. Its unsharpened tip, driven by immense force, precisely parted the two heavy shields that had just opened a gap. Acting alone, he cut straight through the belly of the heavenly wind formation, that is, the central command post, like a sharp dagger. The 36 horsemen surrounding them immediately lowered their banners and closed ranks, forming a barrier like the blood grooves on either side of a blade, firmly blocking the cavalry on both flanks that were attempting to come to the rescue. The rapid ringing of bronze bells, like a downpour, completely drowned out the drumbeats signaling the Hu family army's formation change. With orders coming one after another, the formation could not hold. In the blink of an eye, Yan Xi's horse had charged to the center of the army. He leaped into the air, dodging 3 sweeping spears, and used the spear shafts to propel himself forward with a light push off the tips of his toes. The silverwood spear in his hand plummeted to the ground like a meteor, coming to a steady halt right at the throat of the commander at the eye of the heavenly wind formation. The tip of the spear was just half an inch away from the commander's skin. The wind died down. A deathly silence fell over the entire drill ground. Only the bronze bells on the 36 red flags continued to emit a faint, lingering chime in the breeze. From the moment Yan Xi charged into the formation to the moment he broke through it, less than half an incense stick's worth of time had passed. The 300 renowned Hu clan cavalrymen, whose fame echoed throughout the land, were utterly routed by 36 obscure provincial soldiers using nothing more than a few pieces of red cloth and bronze bells. Hu Changting suddenly braced his hands on the armrests of his chair and stared intently at the scholar in the center of the arena, whose white robe was spotless. There was no trace of contempt left in his eyes, replaced instead by intense shock and fervor. Brilliant! What a masterful use of chaos to overcome order! What a brilliant example of using an opponent's own strength against them! Hu Changting burst out laughing and clapped his hands in admiration. My Marquis's heavenly wind formation has actually been broken by you using this method. Yan Xi, is that right? Would you be willing to join the house of the Marquis of Anyuan and serve as my chief military advisor? Yan Xi withdrew his spear, landed gracefully, and bowed toward the high platform with neither arrogance nor subservience. My lord, you are too kind. That I was able to break this formation is entirely due to the second young lady of the Song family who discerned the celestial timing and bestowed upon me this red silk bowel standard. Having received the kindness of the Song family's second branch, I would never dare to betray my master and switch allegiances. He deftly shifted the credit onto me, not only to elevate the status of the second wife in front of everyone, but also to completely cut off any possibility that the first wife might claim him as her own. Song Jingming, slumped in the muddy water, glared intently at Yan Xi, then turned to look at me. His eyes were bloodshot, and his face was contorted like that of a demon, Jinchu. It was you! You deliberately left that worthless scroll in the study to lure me into a trap. You set this up to frame me. I looked down at him from above, my eyes like a frozen, icy pool. In my past life, he climbed the ranks step by step, trampling on Yensi's flesh and blood and my corpse. In this life, I will make sure he never even steps outside the gates of this training ground. What kind of nonsense are you spouting, brother? I tilted my head slightly, my voice gentle yet as sharp as a knife's edge as it cut past his ear. That Taigong Chiman was nothing more than a scrap of paper left over from father's failed calculations. I'd simply kept it as waste paper. Who would have thought you'd go so far as to order a servant to steal it in the dead of night, only to treat it as gospel? You're foolish and incompetent. Who else can you blame but yourself? I stopped looking at him and turned my gaze to Hu Changting on the high platform, saying in a clear voice, Your Grace, now that the formation has been broken, the Song family has some internal matters to settle. Might we ask you to serve as a witness? The wind on the drill ground seemed to carry the bleak chill of autumn, blowing so cold it seeped into one's bones. Settle the score? Hu Changting raised an eyebrow with interest, his gaze shifting back and forth between me and Song Jingming. How does Miss Song Tu want to settle it? Supporting my father, I walked slowly towards Song Jingming. He no longer displayed his initial arrogance. All that remained was a look of desperate madness on his ashen face. My great-uncle, Song Buchang, stood nearby, stamping his feet in frustration, but, intimidated by the Marquis's imposing presence, he didn't dare take even half a step forward. Your Excellency, please understand, I said, bowing slightly, my voice cool and firm. Song Jingming is not my younger sister's older brother. He is an adopted son whom the eldest branch of the family foisted upon my father to care for him in his old age. My parents treated him as their own son, devoting themselves to his upbringing, yet what he has done today reveals not only a lack of skill but also a failure of character. First, he stole discarded manuscripts from the second branch's study, hoping to gain an unfair advantage. Then, once inside the formation, he disregarded the lives of the soldiers and issued reckless commands from the rear. Had it not been for Mr. Yan's intervention, today's events would not only have brought dishonor to the Song family but also undermined your lordship's prestige. I paused for a moment, my gaze piercing Song Buchang like an icy blade. Uncle, Song Jingming is the biological son of the eldest branch of the family, yet he has committed such petty theft. How will you fulfill your duty to discipline him? When I called out Song Buchang in front of everyone, his old face turned purplish red, and he pointed at me, shouting angrily, Song Jinchu. You're just an unmarried girl, how dare you stir up trouble in front of the Marquis? Jingming is your elder brother. This is an act of gross insubordination. High treason? I scoffed coldly, reaching into my sleeve to pull out an account book and holding it high. My eldest uncle speaks the truth. Since we're talking about high treason, let's settle this account. This ledger clearly documents how, over the years, the eldest branch has lined their own pockets and skimmed off the second branch's monthly allowance. How they've used father's name to swindle people outside the family. And even how they've secretly colluded with outsiders in an attempt to claim father's strategic formations as their own. As soon as those words were spoken, Song Buchang's face turned pale in an instant. His legs gave way, and he nearly collapsed to the ground. In their past lives, they used these very tactics to gradually drive the second wife's family into a corner. In this life, I've long since gathered all the evidence of their crimes. I've been waiting for this very day to nail them to the pillar of shame once and for all. Hu Changting's expression also darkened. What he hated most in life was this kind of petty, underhanded, and treacherous behavior. Bring me the ledgers. The sergeant stepped forward to take the ledger and presented it to the high platform. Hu Changting flipped through a few pages, letting out a series of cold laughs. So much for the Song family's eldest branch. I had originally thought you were merely incompetent, but I never expected you to be so despicable. Guards! Yes! Immediately escort Song Jingming, Song Buchang, and their associates to Shuntian Prefecture and deal with them according to the law. Hu Changting's voice was utterly devoid of warmth. As for the second branch of the Song family. He looked at Yanxi, his gaze betraying his admiration. Yanxi, you have earned merit by breaking through the formation. I, the Marquis, always keep my word. Starting today, you are a colonel in the Hua family army. As for Miss Song, the second daughter. He paused, a complex emotion flashing in his eyes. I have secured justice for the second branch of the Song family on your behalf. But in this world, ultimately, you must rely on yourselves. Thank you, Your Grace, I said, bowing deeply. I knew that Hu Changting's words were both a warning and a sign of approval. Yanxi walked over to me, his gaze deep and gentle. He said softly, "Second young lady, I am honored to have fulfilled my mission." I looked at him, Yanxi, the man who in my past life had been trampled underfoot by Song Jingming and ultimately met a tragic death on the streets, now finally vindicated, standing in the sunlight. And I, too, had finally sent the enemies who had destroyed my entire family straight to hell with my own hands. Sir, you are truly gifted. Jinchu is deeply grateful, I said softly. The first branch of the family fell from power. Song Jingming and Song Buchang were exiled 3,000 li away and barred from holding office for life. The second branch finally regained everything that rightfully belonged to them. Under my devoted care, my father's health gradually improved, and he once again took up the military manuals and battle formations he treasured so dearly. Meanwhile, Yanxi repeatedly distinguished himself in the Hua family's army and rose steadily through the ranks. He was no longer the down-and-out scholar who had been bullied by others, but rather General Yan, whose fame echoed throughout the capital. One winter day, Yanxi stood at the gate of the Song residence, clad in a deep black cloak. Amid the swirling snow, his eyes shone brighter than ever before. Jinchu, he didn't address me as second young lady, but called me by my first name instead, his voice carrying a hint of barely perceptible nervousness. Now that the great vendetta has been avenged, may I, Yen, ask for your hand in marriage? I looked at him, feeling a slight warmth in my eyes. The hardships of my past life felt like a long dream. Now that I've awakened, what remains is genuine warmth and hope. General Yan, I replied with a smile, my eyes crinkling, would you say this counts as repaying a favor? Yanxi smiled, and the sharpness in his eyes softened into a pool of spring water. If I can win the heart of such a lovely lady, even if it means repaying a debt of gratitude, I, Yan, would gladly accept it. The snow falls silently. Life is peaceful. In this lifetime, I have finally taken my destiny firmly into my own hands. That's the end of the story. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, like, share, and leave a comment. Thank you.